Welcome to the Voices of Veterinary Medicine podcast. I'm Dr. K, small animal veterinarian and author, bringing you interviews, inspiration, and information from a wide variety of interesting people working within the field of veterinary medicine so you can learn from their experiences and proactively steer your career to happiness and fulfillment. And before we get started, I'd just like to remind you that for less than the cost of a feather teaser cat toy, you could support the Voices of Veterinary Medicine by going to patreon.com/voicesofvetmed or visit my website at www.realize.vet. That's REALIZE.V as in Victor, ET as in Tom. Just click on the podcast tab, and there you will see the link for Patreon. Your support helps pay for server hosting and production, and it tells me you find value in the show and want to see it continue. Patreon supporters get access to a bonus monthly recording about current issues in veterinary medicine and can submit questions that will be answered in depth in these bonus monthly episodes that are for Patreon supporters only. And I thank you in advance for your consideration of supporting the show, and I'm so glad to have you here. And here's the show. DJ Cannon has devoted his life to understanding the inextricable link between humans, animals, and our world. He is currently a hospital leader for Mars Veterinary Health Group, where he successfully manages multi-million-dollar budgets, engages teams, develops passionate veterinary leaders, and strives for the best quality medical care in each and every patient. In addition to his full-time role, he consults with various organizations such as the Veterinary Information Network, One Health CDC, and the National Institutes of Health. He is the Vice President-elect for the Virginia Association of Licensed Veterinary Technicians and the State Representative for the State Animal Emergency Response Team. He speaks at various conferences on a wide variety of topics and loves to be involved wherever possible. He graduated from Blue Ridge Community College's LVT program in 2008 and continued his education to complete his MPH Epidemiology in Communicable Disease at George Mason University in 2017. As an epidemiologist, his research interests are occupational psychology, infectious disease, and animal health. He lacks the ability to sit in one place and brings to us a wide variety of experiences in academia, small animal practice, zoo medicine, organizational transformation, and Lean Six Sigma operational excellence. In his free time, DJ loves to travel on spontaneous adventures with his Australian Shepherd, Dahlia. Welcome to the podcast, DJ Cannon. Thank you so much for being here. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's wonderful to have you. I've been wanting so much to catch up with you for probably, what's it been, like 7 years?
Oh my gosh, yes, it has. 2010.
8 years since I've seen you. So you were a technician at the teaching hospital at Virginia Tech when I was a fourth-year student for the first half of my clinical rotations anyway. And I remember you very fondly from that time in my life. But let me just begin by asking, when did you decide that you wanted to go into the veterinary medicine field, and what made you want to do that? Were you a kid?
Yeah, that's pretty much where it started, is as a kid. So I was one of those kids that always, would save the squirrel, that fell out of a tree, or it would save a bird, or, what have you. And I started at 13 volunteering for a zoo. And that was kind of where everything started. It was a very small zoo back home in Williamsburg, Virginia. So kind of on the beach side. And I went and I started by making diets. So nutrition, just making the food for all the animals. I had no contact. I was too young. And then I kind of moved up through the ranks to cleaning cages, and then eventually working with the program animals and actually doing educating for the public and stuff. And that's kind of where it started. And then we didn't actually have a hospital in the zoo, but I started working in the kennel part-time while also in high school, and then volunteering on the weekends at the zoo. And that's kind of where I started going into vet medicine, was in the kennels, and then still volunteering at the zoo, and kind of getting a little bit more exposure to wildlife and stuff there as well.
So when you started and you were just making the food for the animals because you were too young for them to let you have contact with the animals directly, you volunteered, or you started because you wanted to work with the animals, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I grew up with animals, mainly dogs and cats. But I also had, we had ferrets growing up. We had parakeets, and just kind of, odds and ends here and there. I was kind of always that young guy that just wanted to do whatever was brand new, whatever was a new idea. I always had these curiosities of what more, what else, and animals kind of gave me that freedom. I always had fun playing with my dogs out in the yard, and I was always interested in how can I do better for animals and also for people as well. I mean, I was a kid that they called me like the mayor of 78th Street. Because I would go to, when I got home from school, I started at Mr. and Mrs. Mint's house. And Mr. Mintz was actually bedridden. He had had a motorcycle accident, so he was paralyzed. But every day after school, I would go and visit him. And he had this little dog, Charlie. And I would go play with Charlie, and I would talk to Mr. Mintz and just sit by his bedside and just talk for hours. And that's kind of started with people, and then animals. Of course, his dog, Charlie. And then I had my dog, which is kind of a Lassie dog, as well as I had a Doberman Pinscher as I got a little bit older. And so I wanted to do more with animals. I always knew I wanted to do something. And then when I got into the zoo, that kind of started to solidify things. And then I went into the kennels, et cetera. So that's where it all started.
Yeah, but like you were a kid and they just like, I don't know, stuck you in the kitchen making food. And that must have taken like a tremendous amount of perseverance and patience for you to wait and keep working there. And wait and keep working there until they finally promoted you to the point where you actually could work directly with the animals. So
yeah,
was that hard for you?
Time. Absolutely. And I'm kind of an overachiever. And so as a 13-year-old starting with the animals in the actual room where the animals were kept, but just being in that kitchen kind of, off to the side, I wanted to do more. And so I would make the diets in the morning. We started at 7 a.m. And so I'd go in, I'd make all the diets. And then those were the dinners because all the breakfast was already in the fridge from the night before. And then we would just add certain things. But I would always walk around the zoo and I would go visit the animals like out on the outdoor trail. So we had skunks and we had possums, we had deer, bobcats. And I would just walk out there and just visit, just to kind of see them, get to know them, just watch them for hours. And then I would also talk to the people, the visitors in the zoo as they were walking around about the animals that I knew. And then I think one of the curators actually saw my interest and saw that I wanted to do so much more. And so she kind of slowly integrated me into, cleaning the cages. She would hold the pets not pets, they were wild animals, but program animals. So she would hold them and I would pet them and then we would talk about them. And so I started to develop trust early on with the keepers at the zoo. And I would follow them. I knew what they were struggling with day to day. And I would always try to do one thing more to help them out, make their day easier. I was a volunteer, not getting paid, but I was having fun to do it. It didn't feel like a job. It didn't feel like anything. I would wake up every weekend excited to go. My mom would drop me off. I would be there. I literally went from 7 a.m. until 7 p.m. Wow. And that was every single weekend, but it didn't feel like work. It was just fun. And I just wanted to be there and just be there with the animals as well as the people. I mean, the people were amazing and they kind of set me up for success early on because they were good people that really kind of showed me the way. They saw my interest. They saw that I was passionate about what I was doing, but I was also their right hand. I wanted to do everything I could to help them out. And so I stood behind them the entire way and they kind of helped me pave the way as well.
Wow. Nice. Great story. So that's wonderful when somebody that's doing something that interests you actually notices you and notices your interests and then tries to mentor you. And also I like the fact that you were watching them too, to figure out what can I do to make this person's job or life easier. So yeah, that's a really
absolutely
piece of advice.
I just watching their routines. I mean, it was day in and day out the same things, but I watched how they interacted with the animals, like some of the training and things they were doing with the animals. And I just wanted to do the same thing. And so I just watched them, learn from them, ask questions. And then eventually they were teaching me to do the same things they were doing. And we all had fun together doing it, honestly.
So then was it during high school that you decided that you wanted to go to a program to become a licensed veterinary technician?
No. So I actually grew up wanting to be a veterinarian. And the reason I went into tech school was because I needed to support myself through college. And so I came from a family that didn't go to college. My mother and father didn't graduate high school. And so I wanted to do something and I needed to be able to financially support myself to get there. And so I went to tech school at 19. So right out of high school, I was home for about a year working at a restaurant, also working at 2 different vet hospitals. And then I got into tech school over in Blue Ridge, which is like in the mountainside. And I was there for 2 years. And then after that, I started to branch out and I went to the vet school. That was my first job at Virginia Tech.
Oh, that was your
I had
first
experience.
Wow, your first job.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was quite the experience. And I was very lucky to get that job right out of tech school. And I applied everywhere. And I think, what helped me get there was not only having the zoo experience, but during tech school, I did my internship at a very large small animal practice and a zoo part-time. And so I was in Northern Virginia. I worked for a very large small animal, just routine. They did emergency as well as exotics. And then part-time, I was at the Baltimore Zoo up in Maryland. And so I would spend my afternoons or weekends that I wasn't in the other hospital at the Baltimore Zoo. And I had that relationship early on. I wasn't an official intern. I literally just emailed everybody on the AZA list. And I said, hey, I'm a technician. I want to get into the zoo. Like, what can I do? Because there's really, at that time, this was, 10 years ago almost, there really wasn't a lot of pathways for interns and for technicians to get into the zoo kind of in that way. It was very hard to get into. It always has been hard to get into zoo. Mm-hmm. And so I started just by emailing literally everybody throughout my school year in tech school. And then it started building those relationships early on. And then when I went to Northern Virginia, I said, hey, I'm here. I'm at a small animal practice where I was actually paid as an intern. And then I said, can I just volunteer my time and kind of have a part-time internship with the zoo? And that's how I got in there.
Yeah. So I interviewed a zoo vet a few episodes ago, and she started by just starting out part-time at a tiny little zoo. And now she's like the head veterinarian at the London Zoo.
Wow.
So
that's amazing.
yeah, it's all about that persistence and just like looking for any opportunity to get your foot in the door, right? And taking it. Mm-hmm. And that's just the first step. And then you just persevere and be patient, and eventually you will find your path to where you want to be.
Absolutely. And I think persistence is key, like you say. I did my internship at Baltimore Zoo, part-time during that summer. And then right after tech school, I had an internship set up with Memphis Zoo. And so I went to Memphis for the summer before I went to Virginia Tech to actually work. And I already had that in place. They weren't looking for a full-time technician. I wanted to be in the zoo, but I didn't have the experience to really be competitive in the job market. And so I applied everywhere. During my time at Memphis, I learned a lot. I was able to practice a lot. We had some really good doctors, really good technicians, really good, keeper staff. And they kind of set me up for success in zoo as far as how a zoo medicine, health program should be. You're not cutting corners. You're not doing those things because that affects your medicine and also your patient at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. They really, really had a good leadership and a good team to keep everything together and keep medicine integrated with the keeper staff and husbandry. Mm-hmm. And so they kind of set me up there. And then I applied for zoos. Chimpanzee Haven in Louisiana was one place that I applied, as well as Virginia Tech, in small animal ICU. I applied to San Diego Zoo. Really anywhere that was looking for a technician. I said, hey, I just want to go somewhere. I need a job. But I also want to be able to, practice, medicine really. I mean, honestly, getting into the field and just starting to get that experience. So that way I could get into vet school eventually by starting at that point.
So when they offered you a job at Virginia Tech, how fantastic.
Yeah, it was amazing. I was shocked. I'm still thankful for the experience that I had. Obviously, I met you there. Yeah. A lot of the students actually, I came up to Northern Virginia after my experience at Virginia Tech, and a lot of the students came up here as well. And so I still work with some of the students that I had back then in emergency and small animal practice. Like it's amazing. I miss the job there a lot.
Wow. So tell me about that experience, because I remember you as one of the technicians who I got the feeling that you felt like part of your job, a big part of your job, was teaching the fourth year students. And I remember you when I was in the ICU there at Virginia Tech, I remember you asking me pointed questions that really made me think more deeply about what was going on, and it helped me to connect the stuff that I'd learned in class to practice in real life. And I've always appreciated that. So you felt that was part of your job, right? Actually teaching the students.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it was kind of going from practice into academia. I learned early on, just when I started at Virginia Tech, I went through, training with all the other technicians that have been there for a long time. And I really kind of got to know what my role was. And I think initially, of course, learning CPR, learning a lot of the ICU and, medical techniques was very helpful, and being able to apply those, but also it's a teaching environment. And I think there is where I started to figure out my passion for teaching. And the students, I learned so much from every single student that walked in the door. Just from the cases that were coming in with the students to where the students were coming from. Some of the, equine students were coming in and they were so nervous, and they would come into the ICU and they're just like, what do I do with this dog? I'm used to horses, but I have to be here for 3 weeks. And they're open to learning. And it was something that I could teach them, as well as when I was in, on call for anesthesia in large animal. I learned from them as well. I'm like, I'm a small animal guy, but help me with this horse, so it was a partnership. And I think the students were, a lot of the technical things, I feel like often the students think, in the fourth year, it's like, do I really need to be placing a catheter? Do I really need to be doing eye drops and all of these things? And the answer is yes. Yeah, you have technicians. Yes, you have support staff in most practices, but there are times where you might not have a dated staff or an experienced staff that you have to teach. And then also you might be at a practice that doesn't have the luxury of having technicians, or, doesn't have the luxury of having assistants and even other veterinarians. And so when you're on your own, really in the vet school is a place where you can learn to apply those skills and really master those skills until you get out into practice. And then you're the last one. When you have 3 technicians that can't place an IV catheter, who else do they go to? And it's going to be you. And so that's the place to practice. And I felt I had an obligation to, one, teach the students to be prepared to get out into the field and to be able to apply those technical skills. But what I got in return from that also was learning from the students. They going into the vet school, that was my first job right out of tech school. And there were so many diseases and things that I'd never heard of. And I remember my first case was myasthenia gravis. And they said that's what this pet had. And I was like, what is that? And so I took the entire record and I copied it and took it home just to read up on it and to follow through, and then came back the next day and I was like, wow. And so every case that I didn't understand, I took it home, I read through it. I, read other resources and things to understand, these cases, and then came back and applied it into the school.
That's fantastic. And I love the way you see the relationship as a partnership. The veterinary student and the teaching hospital veterinary technicians, but also, I presume, when you went out into private practice, you kept that same view of the relationship as a partnership.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And, I think that is the support staff, or, the technician or nurse, however you want to call it these days, with a veterinarian, it is a partnership. And I learned that from before I went to tech school. And it was quite a case that I was involved in. So it was a small animal practice that I was working in, and I worked with a very experienced veterinarian that was amazing. She was just kind of one that took me under her wing, and her personality was just a little bit maybe direct, maybe forward. And some people didn't really understand that, or some people didn't really know how to take that. And so as an 18-year-old coming in this practice, I wanted to learn. That's what I came here for, was to learn, to get experience, to see if this is something I want to go into. And she took me under her wing from the beginning and said, let me teach you. And at the same time, just her being direct, that gave me good direction of what I needed to do, how I could help her. And she had rheumatoid arthritis. And so she had some dexterity, in her hands, and some issues that she could do everything she was trained to do. She could do surgery. She could do medicine. She was an amazing cat vet. She was also an amazing person. And she would do things differently, such as like a spray bottle. She couldn't actually pull the sprayer, strong-handedly. So she would actually unscrew the bottle and then pour it on a paper towel and wipe a table down or what have you. But she made things work to do the right thing for, her patients and also her people, regardless of, the disability that she had. And so early on, I was involved in a case that we had an older Great Dane that had passed away after a spay procedure. And she was a surgeon on the case. And that night I was on call with a different doctor, and I got a phone call that said, this patient has passed. And, of course, me and the doctor talked. We went in and we called the owners and, said, hey, we're sorry this happened. Do you want us to do a necropsy? What do you want to do here? This is something completely unexpected. And we weren't expecting this at all. I mean, it was a breeding Great Dane that was 3 or 4 years old, if I remember right. And so she was a little bit older, of course, a big dog, very vascular, lots of activity in that uterus before. She had plenty of puppies. So big risk going in. But we went in, did a necropsy, and then the surgeon, the lady, that I spoke of, she also came in and talked to the owners, and, we spoke about that. And in the middle of the necropsy, the owners called and said, don't do the necropsy. And we're like, wait, you told us to do it. Now you tell us not to do it. And they said, we're coming to pick up the dog and we're going to take him to the state vet. And so, of course, then you have to worry about, what's going to happen here. And, this was 12 years ago, but from there, they came to pick up the dog. They took it to the state vet to have an autopsy done, or a necropsy, from that point of view. And their plan was to sue the veterinarian. And it was a very long, drawn out process. And I know this is something that a lot of veterinarians fear. And early on, I learned about that relationship from this case. And because she took me under her wing, she taught me everything I wanted to know. She was there for me as a person. There was one day she met me at the clinic at midnight with my chinchilla, who was having seizures. And just out of the kindness of her heart, like, I was scared. I didn't know what to do. I called her and I'm like, hey, Chia I think he's having a seizure or something. He's, drooling. I'm not really sure what to do. And she said, meet me at the clinic in 20 minutes. And I was like, I'm on the way. Thank you so much. And I got there and she took care of everything. She helped me out a lot. But she was the one that looked out for me as a person. And I did the same for her, as a veterinarian, and as a person, I did the same. And what happened over the course of 2 years. So it started with, the board of vet medicine coming in, and they interviewed everybody in the practice. And the people that had these hard feelings or didn't really know how to take her personality, she was very direct, but she had very high standards, and she knows what she wants for her patients. She wants the gold standard, and that's what she went by. Nothing else was accepted. And I sat with the board, and they would ask questions about her dexterity. And they were like, is she able to practice surgery? Does she have problems practicing surgery? And I was like, no. I mean, I would trust her before anybody else in doing surgery on my own pets. Like, she was amazing and she wanted the best. And I know she had that in her heart to do the best thing for that pet and for myself. And so she practiced good quality medicine, gold standard. You're not going to get it anywhere else, honestly. And so she set me up from the beginning for success, teaching me about the relationship between a veterinarian and the support staff. And for 2 years, there was some other people in the clinic that they interviewed that kind of had those hard feelings, and they took those hard feelings and they actually used it against her. And they would say things like, she shouldn't be practicing and she's very mean and all these things. And, being very subjective about it and really not supporting her at all, regardless of what she had done to help them out, etc. And at the end of the case, so it was 2 years later, her and I were working in a different practice together. We had left because the practice was bought out and we decided to move on. And so I went to another practice a couple months. She came and worked at the same practice, and we were on a house call together, and we were at a stoplight, and I looked over and she was in tears. And I was like, hey, doc, so-and-so, I was like, what's going on? Are you okay? And she just looked at me and she said, DJ, I just want to say thank you. And I was like, well, you're welcome. I mean, for what? What's happening here? And she said, well, I went to court, and everything was thrown out. There was no wrongdoing here. Her ligatures were fine, all of these things. They got the results from the autopsy of the dog, and the dog actually ended up having a clotting problem and a mass in its chest. However, the owners had declined blood work ahead of time. They didn't want to do PT, PTT. They didn't want to do x-rays as we had suggested. They also didn't even want to do blood work, but we did pre-op blood work for our own, own knowledge and our own being. And we didn't charge them. However, that's what we were faced with. And so we did the basic, baseline chemistry CBC. We didn't do PT, PTT or the x-rays because they, had declined it. And so this dog ended up having all of these things that we would have found. And then she proceeded to tell me that she got to read and listen to all of the interviews in the investigation. And she was appalled by what some of the things that, people said about her. And I couldn't imagine. I mean, honestly, it wasn't just her being her, I understood her because I was willing to open up that partnership, and I was willing to listen to her. I was willing to help her and do whatever she needed. And there were times that she would walk into treatment, and then I would come in the morning and everybody would leave, because when she came in, she was like, I need this. Can somebody help me with this? And people were just being lazy, didn't want to work, they weren't there for the right reasons. And I stayed. I was like, what can I do to help you? Like, I'm here, I'm here to be paid. I'm here to work. I'm here to learn. I'm here for you. Like, tell me what I can do. And at the end of the day, she's good. As a veterinarian, she's still practicing, the gold standard that she always has. This case kind of set me up from the very beginning. This was before even tech school. But I learned about that partnership with the veterinarian early on, and you really have to look out for each other. You really have to be there for each other, help each other. Yeah. You're also there to keep each other accountable, because we all make mistakes. We're humans, and that happens. Yes. But in the very beginning, I was honest. I was everything from the beginning. I was there. And I knew that she had no problems doing surgery, even, despite her dexterity. She made things work, and she was there for the health of the patient. And I trusted her to do that. And I trusted that partnership that we had in working together.
And the other people that sort of threw her under the bus, I mean, they were doing that because they didn't like her personally, or maybe she was too hard on them because she didn't think that they were taking their job seriously enough. Right.
Exactly.
Or they, and, there's a lot of this in veterinary medicine. I've seen it myself. And, I've had difficult relationships with support staff, especially when I was fresh out of school. I felt like there were some technicians who were disrespectful to me, because I was a new grad, and I guess they felt like they could treat me that way or something, or because I didn't know or have all the technical skills they did. So, and that was a really, really difficult period for me. And what I've come to recognize is, and so I sort of had some resentment, for support staff at that point. And, I've had to work through that. And what I've come to recognize is, now that I'm working again in ER medicine, is that it really is, it's not you against me, me against you. We have to be a team, and we have to recognize that, like you said, everybody makes mistakes. So yeah, sometimes a technician will say, Dr. Kung, do you really want to prescribe this much? Are you sure this is the right dose that you wanted? Oh my God, no, I moved the decimal point. You're totally right. Thank you so much. Right?
Absolutely.
So yeah, but does that mean that, if you see me make mistakes, does that mean that you should disrespect me?
Absolutely not.
Right?
No.
Yeah. So that's really sad when I see that happening in a practice. And the same thing with the technicians. Like, okay, you don't know, one of my technicians was doing anesthesia for me, and she kept turning the isoflurane level up because she thought the dog was too light. And she thought the dog was too light because his eyes were central. And like, the planes of anesthesia, they'll roll down when they get into a deeper plane. But if they get even deeper than that, those eyes will roll back up. So she was misreading it. And, when I first started, I probably would have gone ballistic over an error like that, because I'm like, oh my God, you almost killed my patient,
Yeah,
but that doesn't help anybody. That would not help her get better. It would just make her feel worse about herself. And it would make her perform even less well, because she was feeling, shame and all that. So it really is important that when we see each other make mistakes, that we support each other as human beings. Just say, hey, maybe you want to do it like this, or actually that's what this means, and just be nice about it, because we are the team, and we get so much of that mistreatment or disrespect from the public in general, that if we have to face that from our own team members, from our coworkers inside the hospital, it can make things really genuinely unbearable.
Absolutely. And I think that's a big part of our profession today, and kind of where we struggle. We all have similar struggles in our profession, and we, see things like, suicide and, all these stuff that's coming to the surface now. And we kind of have to reflect and look at ourselves and say, what are we doing about it? One, two, are we holding our clients accountable? Are we working in the teams the way we should be? Are we supporting each other the way we should be? What are the things that we can do better day to day that actually help this long term? Because it's a profession that we all are a part of, and we all have a lot of, doing within the profession. But I think the relationships that we have with each other is where it all starts.
Mm-hmm.
That's where, those times for those opportunities, right? Where, you say, hey, look, this patient's actually not liked. Let's try this instead. Let's see what happens. Versus saying, hey, what are you doing? Do you know what you're doing? You almost killed my patient. That there's two ways to say it. And
Yes.
One is supportive and is teaching and that opportunity. And the other one is not so supportive and is more dismissive of skills and all of those things. And I think it's really about just supporting one another and just being there.
Yeah.
It is the relationships you have at work. You spend more time at work than you do with your partner sometimes. And I think, there's a huge opportunity for us to work, more cohesive as a team. And to also just understand that regardless of what initials or what degrees and everything is behind your name, you're a human at the end of the day, and treat each other with respect. That's the basis of all human understanding, is just treat each other with respect, support each other, be kind, be respectful. And that's all it goes. Everything goes on from there, but you have to start there and respect each other on that level.
Yeah, so important. It really makes a difference between being miserable and being happy.
Got it. Absolutely.
How you get along with your coworkers. So I want to ask you, when you were at Virginia Tech as a technician with the fourth year students, what are some of the things, can you glean from that experience? Can you tell me, what is some advice that you might offer future veterinarians as when they're fourth year students, based on the experience that you had working with fourth year students?
I think kind of going back to, quite a few years ago, I think really that is your opportunity to soak everything in. There's so many different, there's specialists there's so many different, even your peers, as students, technicians, support staff, all of that. There's so much that everybody can teach you. And if you're open to learning, and if you're open to just being that sponge that just soaks in everything, you're going to use some part of that throughout your career. And so just be open to learning. Be kind and respectful, even if it's 2 a.m. and you're being called in for surgery, just remember that, hey, this pet needs surgery at the end of the day. And that's why we're here. Being called in at 2 a.m., nobody wants to be, woken up in their sleep and having to go in for that. And it is stressful, and it does, take a toll on your body and, your mental health and things like that. But it's not all the time, and remember the reasons why you came into the profession. If you truly are passionate about being here for pets, for, animals in general, whether that's wildlife, whether that's, equine, whether that's, food animal medicine, small animal, what have you. At the end of the day, we have an obligation to help the animals, to be here for the animals, as well as the client. The client is kind of our communicator. That's the people that we have to communicate about the animals. They're the ones that make the decisions for the animals, but it's up to us to communicate the right information for that person, so they understand what's happening, so we can do what we need to do. But I think first and foremost is also, in addition to being open to learning, in addition to kind of, controlling our own emotions and just remembering why we come into the profession, it's really about taking care of yourself as well. You have to balance things. And it's really, in my opinion, there's no such thing as a balanced, a work-life balance. Life is life. There's going to be times where you have to put more energy into work. There's going to be times where you have to put more energy into home. And that's just life. It's a circle. There's going to be demands on you all the time, but what you do with those demands and how you take those demands is what determines the outcome. Because if you go into everything stressed and, kind of overworked, and just those feelings of previous experiences that you're holding on to, or maybe grudges and things like that, you're never going to get anywhere. You're going to be stressed at everything you go into. Be open to change, be adaptable to learning, be adaptable to different environments, and just go with the flow. Things happen, everything happens for a reason, but you have to stay strong in your own health, your own well-being, and just take care of you. And then you're going to be your best person in every situation that you go into. But I think that's where it all starts.
And you mentioned the importance of controlling your emotions, which I totally agree with. And nobody tells you that in vet school, or probably in the technician programs. They don't tell you about that part, because this is a really emotional job. It's an emotionally charged field. So when did you discover that controlling your emotions was important, and how did you learn to control your emotions?
I think it was at the vet school at Virginia Tech. And The reason, so I remember specifically one lesson. We had a patient that was crashing. And so we pressed the blue button. You remember the blue call button, which sets an alarm in the entire hospital, and the blue lights go off. So that way everybody in the entire teaching hospital knows there's a CPR, there's something happening in an ICU. So everybody runs down. It's about, 50 to 100 people standing around. There's 2 technicians and one of the clinicians standing there. We're doing CPR on a cat. And I was new, this is in my first couple of weeks, and I've seen CPR situations. I've learned how to do it. I've never been in a situation where I had, 50 to 100 people staring at me doing CPR. And I was watching the technician and I was watching the clinician there at the moment. And what I saw in their faces was calm. What I saw from them was everything's okay. We're doing what we can do. And that's really all we can do. We're doing our best, and we have to believe that we're doing our best. Sometimes we don't have control of the outcome, but at least we're trying to bring this pet back. What happens is really up to the pets and up to what we do. As long as we're doing our best, it's really up to everything else, right? And I think at that moment is where I kind of learned, wow, in this situation, when I'm calm, when I have control of my own emotions and I'm not, expressing frustration, I'm not throwing things different places, people are watching that. And when you're calm, people are listening, people are learning, people are open to actually, doing their very best in a situation like that when they get into it. But when you're throwing things, immediately there's a wall between you and the people that are watching you. And that's not a good experience for people to learn from. That's not what you want. Think about if an owner was watching a CPR situation, which, hopefully that doesn't happen very much, but it doesn't look good to owners. They don't really understand what's happening. However, if you're throwing things, really, like, what are you really doing for the pet? The time you took to throw something, you could do some extra compressions, and maybe that'll actually bring the pet back. I think it's a hard lesson to learn. Emotions are valid. Emotions are important. Emotions are something that you have to go through as a human. You have to work through, and you have to deal with. But the way you express them, the way that you control them, and you keep them under wraps in an appropriate manner is really up to you. And you have to be the role model to set that example.
And how, controlling your emotions is not easy, and it's less easy for some of us than others. Certainly, I find it very difficult. But what are some of the tricks that you use in order to control your own emotions when you're in a stressful situation, when things aren't going the way you think they should, and you are feeling that frustration and that anger arising in you? How do you do it?
Yeah, it's hard, and every day it takes practice. I think very early on, as somebody who's very passionate about, what we do on a daily basis, all of us are emotional, beings. We're an emotional business. It takes, from the beginning, you have to, recognize the emotions that are happening. And is this appropriate to outburst? There's different types of communicators. And there's expressive people, which are your people that really throw their emotions out there. They're people that are very outward spoken. They're people that when they get frustrated, they're the first ones that are going to tell you. And when you walk in the clinic, you're going to notice they're frustrated. Then you have analytical people who, I'm actually analytical myself, where I process things. I'm all about logic, and I take my time to just kind of organize my own, feelings, my own logic to make the best of the outcome. But the way that I think about things is more internal versus external, like an expressive. You have your drivers who are just they're all about efficiency. They don't show any emotions. They don't, do anything with emotions. They're literally let's just get the job done. That's how they are. And you have your amiables that just kind of go with the flow. They're your people that say, okay, I'll go over here this day and I'll help you out here. Okay, I'll go over here this day. They just go with the flow. They really don't want to have an opinion. They don't want to hurt any others' feelings. They're really good people that will take care of everybody on the team. They want harmony, but they just go with the flow, and they're okay with that. So I think, one, you have to recognize what kind of communicator are you? And in addition to that, once you recognize what you are and how you communicate with people, how can you communicate with people that are opposite of you, or how can you help other people? And it often comes by asking the questions. Instead of telling somebody, ask them. Because when you tell somebody, you're expressing, an opinion. You can step on toes very easily when you tell somebody to, hey, check yourself. No, versus sitting down with somebody in a private room and saying, hey, what can I do to help you right now? I can see you're very frustrated and something's going on. is there something I can do to take, off your plate, or is there something I can do to help you at the moment to, hopefully get some relief? And then, I think one, recognizing that is important. Two, sitting down with that person and giving them the time they need to just de-stress, to relax, and to also take something off their plate. You're offering your help for them. That does a lot for just supporting and just really working through those things, but also being okay with being vulnerable and asking for help. And I think you have to recognize your own emotions. You also have to know how you communicate yourself, and then also learn how to work with other people who communicate differently.
Definitely something that we all have to work on every single day, probably for the rest of our lives.
Oh, yes.
It's process, right? It's a process. So, all right. Now, after VT, so I want to follow your career to figure out how you ended up here where you did. So after Virginia Tech, tell me what happened professionally after that. Where did you go?
So I went to, at Virginia Tech, I was there to network, and I really got to know a lot of clinicians. My plan was to be there to get experience, network, and get into vet school, right? And I kind of started some of the research animals were coming into ICU, and I needed to get out of the country. Blacksburg, it's rural. It's a college town, and I needed to get back to the city. I lived in kind of the mountains for tech school, and then going to Virginia Tech, that was kind of the same, but, maybe a little more lively. And I was like, I need to get back to the city. And so I started just looking at opportunities, and I kind of had this, do I really want to go to vet school? Do I not? Should I branch out and really get to know some other areas that I might be interested in before I go into vet school and, establish this debt, spend the next, 7-8 years, going through the rest of my prerequisites and then getting into vet school and spending 4 years with that. And then I kind of had to think back, and zoo medicine is my passion. Zoo medicine is where my heart will always belong. And I knew the opportunities were very far and few. And so, I had to start, do I do small animal as a secondary, something I'm also passionate about, but since there's not much opportunity in zoo, would I be okay doing small animal for the rest of my life? I don't know. And so I applied to National Institutes of Health in Bethesda, Maryland, just right outside of DC. And I got the job there, and I worked in infectious disease research. So I moved from Virginia Tech in 2010 up to Maryland, where I was involved on the veterinary side of research. I mean, we had chicken pox, we had rabies, we had a lot of different diseases we were working with. But for me, that was very stimulating. It was something different. I remember being in tech school in one of my research and zoo classes, saying to myself, I'll never be in research. I'll never go that avenue. However, I did, and there was an opportunity that, one, licensed technicians and research are very different. They have their own kind of licensing structure and regulations and things. And as an LVT coming in, I just bought a book and I literally read the entire book on lab animal medicine. So I could prepare for this interview, and I could prepare and be there and say, okay, I remember the gestation of a mouse. I remember the stages of, a little mouse and guinea pigs and all these things. Like I remember learning some in school, but I was like, this is an opportunity for me to try something different. Let me go over here and just see what I can learn, see what other things there are to do in vet medicine, and let's see what happens. So I started working there, and it was a government job. So it was in NIH under the Allergy and Infectious Disease Institute, and I loved it. I mean, I had an amazing time. I was learning every single day. I really got to know a different side of lab animal medicine. And what I think felt the best about this position, and what really, made me feel valued and where I was, is I was the voice of the animal. In research, you hear all kinds of things, and until you're actually there, you don't realize that we need more people in research. We need to be there more, because when animals are in pain, when animals are in distress, it's us that know what they're going through. It's not the, primary investigators, so to speak, not all the time. Sometimes they're maybe human MDs or, otherwise that are doing research. Yes, you have your veterinary staff that's kind of there to help you through the process and help them figure out what they're going to do. But at the end of the day, your veterinary team is the one that's looking at these animals on a daily basis, and the ones that recognize pain, the ones that treat the pain, the ones that, recognize when infection or things are just going wrong and it's time to stop, or it's, time to do something different. And I think that's where I experienced a lot of cases and a lot of hard things in research. And it was mostly from trying to teach people that were taught from a human perspective how to work with these animals and how to take care of these animals the best that you possibly could. And that was where I went after Virginia Tech, and it was an amazing experience. And I was only there for about 7-8 months. And I ended up leaving because I was trying to finish my bachelor's, and the schedule just with the government job was not flexible at all, but I needed to finish my, education. And so I ended up having to leave to go finish school. But yeah, that was my experience after tech.
Yeah. I'm really glad that you brought that up, and the point that you made about, because I think there's a lot of misperception over there in terms of the general public, right? They think if you work in, and I used to think this too, like, how could you? That's so awful. How could you participate in animal research? And I can empathize with that view. But what I wish people understood, and even within the veterinary medicine field, a lot of us don't realize this, that the veterinary medicine people who are doing animal research, that are involved in animal research, they are there for the animal, because no one else is going to be advocating for the animals. That's why we're there. Yeah. So I'm vital. I'm glad you brought that up. It's such an important thing for people to understand.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm sorry, I cut you off, but then you were finishing your bachelor's degree, and that's why you left the NIH.
Mm-hmm. And then I went to a emergency clinic in Northern Virginia, and I worked overnight because it was easier for me to go to school during the day.
Yes.
And, sleep was rough, but I worked overnight and I went to school during the day. And emergencies always, I like that adrenaline. I like that part of medicine. And so it was an amazing clinic with just amazing people, amazing veterinarians. Like the entire place was just awesome. And we actually had some of your classmates, Courtney Mason, she came down and she worked at Nova at the clinic that I was at. And she was an intern right after vet school. And it was a really good place to be. They were supportive. The medicine was top notch. I was able to practice as a technician, and I was given that trust and that freedom to do what I was legally able to do and to practice the skills that, maybe otherwise I may not be able to do for X, Y, or Z. But it was a great place. I worked overnight, finished my bachelor's, and then after I finished my bachelor's, I went to a day practice, a primary practice, a private practice, and I worked there so I could work on my master's. So my bachelor's was in biology. I transferred from Virginia Tech. I was a student, and I was working at Tech, and then I transferred up to George Mason and started my bachelor's in biology. And I took a class as an elective. It was epidemiology, and the professor was just amazing. I mean, honestly, like I can't explain it other than saying I got over 100% in the class because it just made sense. You have a disease, you have, somebody who dies or does not. And then you're looking for cures for the disease. Like epidemiology is really, I liked the kind of the adrenaline behind it is outbreak investigations and really trying to figure out causes. It's a big old puzzle that you really have to ask the right questions at the right time to figure out the causative, causality and, go from there. But so I took this class in undergrad, and it just hit a light with me. And I talked to the professor, and, I was like, I think I want to change my major to this. Like biology, I'm taking things like genetics and organic chemistry, and wow, I respect those disciplines. Epi, that's where my heart is. Like, I'm starting to feel like, wow, maybe this is something I want to go into a little bit more. So I changed my major to global and community health, finished my bachelor's in that. And then my last day of my bachelor's, I went and spoke to the same professor and, just said, hey, thank you for everything. And, said goodbye. And she said, well, what's next? It's like, I don't know. I think I need to take a year off. I want to start paying back some loans. I need to save up some money. Like I got some recovery to do, and I'm just kind of a little burned out. I need some time off. And she said, well, what do you think about a master's in public health? And I was like, I love it. Like I love epidemiology. I would love to study more and I would love to learn more about it. But I still think I need a break. And she said, well, just apply. All you got to do is apply. If you take time off, most often people don't come back. Just apply and let's see what happens. And so I applied and ended up getting in. So I did my master's in public health and epidemiology. I focused in infectious and communicable diseases. And then I graduated with that last year, and I was working at the day practice, small animal. And then it was about 3.5 years ago. I left the day practice and I went to work for corporate practice. And that's where I am today, in a small animal corporate practice. And I finished my master's last August in epidemiology. And so I'm kind of figuring out what's next. Thank you very much. Yeah. So it's been a journey. I've kind of been in different areas. I've really done what, I felt I needed to do to kind of get experience outside of vet med, but also still within vet med. I mean, that's where my experience is. That's where all of my skills are, is in veterinary medicine. It's taught me some of the greatest lessons in life. And I think it's really got me to where I am today. And, academically, my MPH is more focused in human medicine. And I've kind of ventured that route, and I'm just not sure that's a place that I'm going to go, but I'm going to stay in vet medicine. I'm just trying to figure out how to use my skills and also my MPH in that realm. So, yeah.
Interesting. So, I mean, what I hear from you is we never really arrive. Like when I was reading your bio, I'm like, oh, wow. But you're still looking, right?
Yeah.
You're still thinking about what's next, and you don't know. So that's how life is. But so right now you're a hospital leader for Mars, and you speak in your bio about one of the things that you do. One of the parts of your job is developing passionate veterinary leaders. Like, tell me about that.
Yeah. So I have to tell you, it was quite a surprise for me for this practice. So most of my experiences in private practice, or the different places I spoke of, and when I came to the practice, in private practice, you look at corporate medicine and it's the enemy. And the reason I came here was to be friends with the enemy. I wanted to see what was happening over here that people hated. What was it that, all of these cases that I saw in private practice that were, maybe not done in the best way, or maybe, had mistakes or things that happened. What's going on in there that maybe I could help with, or I need to learn from? I mean, honestly. And so I came to be friends with the enemy. And I have to tell you, being in the environment of what we thought were horrible veterinarians, was horrible medicine, or corporates taking over the world, blah, 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 blah. It's different. I spend every single day just as if I was in private practice. I manage my hospital just as any other practice would. And I develop my team just as I would anywhere else. And I don't even think about, the corporation behind it. And yeah, my job is actually business. It's really operations, but I hate operations, in all honesty. I do not spend my day looking at numbers. I don't. I spend my time and my day with my people. My team and the pets. That's where my heart is. That's where I'm going to spend all of my energy. And I have to say, in the beginning, it was a rough start. And the reason was because of my line manager at the time. He had been, in corporate medicine. He was a business guy, because I'm on the business side. And the way that, it kind of operates is you have a leader on the business side and you have a leader on the medicine, and they partner to work together. And, he hired me, and I was working at a hospital. I had an amazing chief of staff who's the leader on the medicine side. And I'm still here today because of him. Dr. J was somebody who really was passionate about what he did. And he also helped me learn what I could contribute as a leader. What is it that makes me, and what can I do to offer other people, advice and help other people grow and develop into who they want to become. And so Dr. J had left about a year and a half later. And then I got a new line manager, and that's where I really learned a lot about myself. And being in this practice so far for 3.5 years, I've learned more about myself, and I've been able to develop myself into the person I am because of the people that I've come in contact with, the people that are just invested and passionate about my own, knowledge and my own growth themselves. They've really put a lot to help me grow, to help me become who I am. And I do that for my people in return. And so developing, leaders in my hospital, it starts with empowering, but it also starts with recognizing their fears with them and creating a safe environment for them to be able to challenge those fears and to overcome them. And I spend a lot of time, I get engaged and I get excited when I'm able to sit down with someone and help them, one, recognize what happened in a certain situation, and then also give them the tools, give them the support to stand behind them, but also give them a safe place for them to overcome that and to face that problem on their own the right way.
Wonderful. Yeah. So this kind of goes back to what we were talking about before in the partnership, right? So it really is about working with people as human beings and recognizing that we all have areas that we need to get better at.
Absolutely.
And growth is going to be a perpetual endeavor for all of us, and recognizing that and accepting that and helping each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think, early on, in this practice, it's something called StrengthsFinders. You may be familiar with.
Yes.
It's like a Gallup. Yeah. So we did StrengthsFinders, and I got my top 5 strengths. And, I was like, what is this? And I read it. And one kind of thing that stuck out with me was my strength of being deliberative. And, this was something, so Dr. J and I, they were only doing it for hospital leaders at the time, because of course there's some cost behind it and stuff like that. And, we got to know a lot about ourselves from these strengths. And from my point of view, I really thought it was important to develop people from a positive place, but also develop people from where they're strong at. When you take somebody and say they're strong in, analyzing a situation, take that strength and apply that to a place of opportunity for them, or for the hospital, or for pets, or wherever. And they can thrive because they're strong. You can't take somebody and beat them down and tell them that they're not good, they're not good, they're not good, they're not good. Well, what are you going to do with that not good? Nothing, because you're not good, right? And I think we started with the strengths. And so Dr. J and I, we took our entire team, and him and I split up the cost and paid for our team to do it. So that way they could also get the same benefit that we got from StrengthsFinders. Yeah. And then we started a culture in the hospital of managing from strengths, talking with people and working together from our strengths. And it created an amazing culture in our hospital.
Wow. And yeah, that's the thing about StrengthsFinder, is that's one of their premises, right? Is, when you're trying to get somebody to improve and you just go after their weaknesses, these are the areas that you need to get better at. It's demoralizing. And maybe that's not their natural talent. Like, you're wasting energy trying to develop talents in people who just may not inherently have them, when what you really ought to do to create a positive culture is to look at what they're good at and make them be even better at that, because that's where their natural proclivities lie. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. So one of the things that I have concerns about for veterinary medicine in general is, the support staff. I worry about the support staff and the future of people who work as veterinary technicians, or receptionists, or assistants, whatever. But, these are people who, they have very difficult jobs, emotionally difficult, physically difficult, mentally difficult, and they don't make that much money, and it concerned me, because there's nothing that's going to make or break a hospital more than a good support staff, right?
Absolutely.
But how do we get them? I mean, what can we offer them to stay in this field and to stay with an organization? When my perception is that they could go out into the world and do other things and have less stress, less physically demanding jobs, and make more money. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have any insight about that?
Yeah, I think, of course there's no, one right answer, and, many people have different opinions, and certainly I think it's important to come together and talk about it. And I think it really starts from being a valued team player. Yes, being a technician, you don't make much money. I don't make much money. I can make more money as a technician in an emergency practice overnight than I can as a hospital manager where I am now. And to me, it's not about the money. I'm a guy that, I have an apartment that I have to pay for, and, a dog and things that I have to take care of on, from life. But I love what I do, and I feel like I'm a valued team player because I have the support of my team and the people around me. And if people, I think technicians, one, have to fight for their worth. They also have to be willing and open to learning new things every single day. teach people, be open to learning, from everybody else as well. And I think some people, there's a lot of this struggle with, having technicians and then having assistants, and the technicians may have an attitude and may think they're better than the assistants, or, what have you. There's always a struggle of, I'm a technician, I have a license, that's different. And honestly, it's not that. That doesn't make you different. How you utilize that is what makes you different. And I think we have to pull people beside us, and we have to take people under our wing and really teach them what their worth is and what they can do. How can they take their passion and excel for the field, for themselves, for our pets and medicine all together. And I really think it starts with bringing somebody next to you and just saying, hey, what can I do to teach you? Or if you see them doing something and say, hey, can you teach me how you do that? Like, you have to be open to that partnership again, that having that trust in that relationship is strong. And I think between a veterinarian and a technician, it's just the same. There's so much that I learned from all of my, veterinarians that I'm involved with every single day. And at the same time, there's a lot that I can teach them too. It's a partnership. I'm happy to challenge them on different things because they look for that in me, and I look for them to challenge me as well. If there's somewhere I can improve, if there's a decision that I'm making that they don't agree with, let's talk about it. The door is open, and I'm open to that. And I want that challenge because that's important for me as a person to grow, and also for them to grow as well. And I think in the field today, we struggle with a lot of public recognition. We struggle with state to state. There's on average in Florida, a technician makes about $10 an hour. And then on average in, let's say Northern Virginia, a technician may make around $20, $25 an hour. And there's a huge difference. And of course, there's a different cost of living and things. But at the same time, the laws and regulations, and it kind of starts with that. The scope of practice and what technicians are able to do, and the value of technicians in the workplace, and the value of technicians from the legal perspective too. It's not set up for technicians in some places. And that's, for instance, like, let's take a registered nurse. When you walk into a hospital, what a registered nurse is there for. That person's going to be there for your care. They're going to be there to take care of you, from a physical level, emotional level. Like your registered nurse, exactly what to expect from them, right? Your doctor, you also know what to expect from them. You're going to talk to your doctor about all of the data from your own body, blood work and results and diagnoses. And, you're going to discuss with your doctor different options from medicine. You're going to discuss with your nurse your care, and also everything that comes along with that. And I think when one of our clients walks into our hospital and we say, I'm a technician, I'm going to be helping you today, or I'm an assistant, I'm going to help you today, I don't know that the owner really understands what they're in for. They don't know what to expect from us because our roles are not defined. And, people live in different places, people experience different things. And I think it's important that, one, I'm really passionate about the Veterinary Nurse Initiative and actually moving our country in a place of where technicians become registered veterinary nurses. That's actually the title we're all going to go by in all 50 states. Our scope of practice is going to be the same. So everybody has to go to school for the same degrees. They have to, have the same skill sets and the same knowledge base to practice from in the beginning. I think that's important to have an even playing field, that the public will recognize us because they understand what a nurse does. They understand what a nurse is. A registered veterinary nurse is just the same. And if we look at the European model, they don't have some of the problems that we have. And a lot of that may come from just that. And so I think that's where the profession is going. I think that's where we need to go personally. I think as a technician, when you think of that title as a technician, you think of somebody in a lab, you think of somebody that has one job. They're an expert in, let's say, chemistry machines, or they're an expert in urinalyses, or, those things. And we do much more than that, and there are veterinary technicians that just work in lab, or that just work in anesthesia, or what have you. And that's okay, but you're still trained in radiology. You're still trained in pharmacy. You're still trained in dentistry. You're still trained in so many different areas. And I think in the human field, registered nurses are the same. They have specialty, certifications and things they go into for anesthesia, for all of that stuff, the same that we have. Why is it that we're so gray and they have this kind of black and white distinction? And I think there's some lessons that we can learn from human medicine when it comes to that. And I think the profession's going in a certain place. We just got to have the support. And honestly, we've learned some lessons from Ohio and Tennessee and what they're doing. And a lot of it starts with the veterinarians as well. The veterinarians have an obligation to support us and to be there, and to help the profession move forward, because that also defines their roles. If you as a veterinarian walk into a practice, it's doing relief, you certainly would understand this. Going into a practice, who's your first person? Mm-hmm. I don't know. I'm going to walk into a brand new place where I'm doing relief work, and who's my technician? Okay. What are their skill set? Can they place an IV catheter? Am I going to be placing the IV catheter? If this pet crashes, who do I call? And I think that's going to help the veterinarian, is having these defined roles and knowing when you walk into a practice, whether you're there every day or not, you know what to expect from your team. You know what to expect from your assistants, your nurses, yourself, et cetera. And I think having that kind of hierarchy or having that breakup in the team is really going to be helpful into us practicing even better quality medicine than we do today. But also working cohesively as a team, is having those defined expectations and roles.
So I'm sorry, DJ. I know a little bit about this initiative for veterinary nurses, but when you talk about what happened in Tennessee, I don't know what you're talking about. What? Oh,
so yeah, it started this year actually. It started planning several years ago, where NAVTA is actually. There's an initiative that partners with NAVTA to change veterinary technicians in all 50 states into registered veterinary nurses. And there's a lot of differences state to state, and that's kind of some of the problems that they're dealing with. But so this group of in the Veterinary Nurse Initiative, what they're doing is supporting state associations in going before legislation to become registered veterinary nurses. So there's a lot of groundwork involved. First of all, the support, understanding, do you have support of the veterinarians? Do your veterinarians in your state want registered veterinary nurses? Having it from the top down, that's the one place to start. The next thing is, do the technicians in the state want to be registered veterinary nurses? What's the kind of feeling and the general view from everybody in the state? And then once you have all of that under wraps, so in Virginia right now, I'd say it's about 60 to 70% of veterinary technicians want the name change to be registered veterinary nurses. And so that's where we start. And then going into practices, getting the support. Of course, it takes lobbyists. It takes, people with that legal lingo, people that understand the framework of that system, to go before the House. And so changing things from a legal perspective takes time. There's also a lot of, you have to worry about elections and the timing of elections, and do you have the support of your senator and things like that. So what they're doing is they're working with the state associations. This Veterinary Nurse Initiative is working with the state associations and going into states, basically. So let's use Tennessee as an example. So going into Tennessee, they're working together to go into the House, where they go before, the right people, and they'll basically say, all right, we have this petition. We want to change I think in Tennessee, it's a veterinary medical technician into a registered veterinary nurse. This is the scope of practice currently. This is what our people do. This is what our people are trained on. This is what they go to school for. This is, as a profession, this is how it's going to help us. This is how we're going to be able to help the public, which is really what, politicians and things are supposed to look out for, is the public. So this is how it's going to help us help our pet owners and help us as a veterinary profession, and also help just kind of the general medicine profession, overall. But the problem in Tennessee, what they had was the registered nurses, so human registered nurses, they don't understand what veterinary technicians do. They went in, and there was this kind of struggle of, well, when we see nursing, we think of humans, and how are we going to distinguish the two of veterinary nurses versus registered nurses? Is the public going to be able to recognize this? The veterinary technicians did not have the support of the registered nurses in the state of Tennessee. And they backed out, the Veterinary Nurse Initiative and the state association backed out and said, all right, let's take a step back. We obviously have some work to do with our relationship with registered nurses. We need to talk to them and educate them on what we actually do so they understand. And then we'll come back and approach this another time. And so,
DJ, I'm sorry to interrupt, but is this initiative simply about changing the title of a licensed veterinary technician into a registered veterinary nurse, or is more training involved in order to become a registered veterinary nurse? Like, is it just a name change?
No, it's complicated. And the reason it is because it is a name change. That's one part of it. But it's also changing the scope of practice. And so that's really what, let's say, veterinary nurses are legally able to do in practice. Because, in the state of Virginia, for instance, you have to be licensed in order to place an IV catheter. Well, in the state of Florida, that doesn't exist. And so basically you can hire somebody off the street, it's their first day, teach them to place an IV catheter. There's many opinions on whether that's appropriate or not, and I think, recently in Virginia, we had a petition before the board that said, we want to change having to be licensed to place an IV catheter. And part of the argument was, well, I, as a veterinarian, some of the people that were speaking, in the petition, I, as a veterinarian, can teach my assistants how to place an IV catheter, but this veterinarian versus that veterinarian versus that veterinarian, what are we teaching them to do? Are we teaching them to scrub appropriately, using the right scrub? What is the process? And it's going to be different person to person. There's no standard there. And so changing the name, changing the scope of practice to that way it's even all across the states. The other piece is having, education. So you have to have a certain education in order to become a registered veterinary nurse. That's also different state to state. In Virginia, you have to go to a program that's AVMA accredited and you have to pass a national state exam. In the state of Maryland, you can be grandfathered in basically from a bachelor's and utilize your experience as an assistant to then sit before the board exam. So every state's different in how technicians are regulated. And in some states, it's not regulated at all. There's no such thing as a licensed technician or anything like that. And so it's so different state to state. And so, from our point of view, from a veterinary nurse initiative is, what does the public see? We don't even know, what's going on, state to state. Right. It's so different. So how does the public know what to expect when they bring their pet to the veterinary hospital?
Yeah. Interesting. So it sounds like in some places, in some cases, veterinary technicians are going to have to go back for more education.
Maybe. I mean, I don't know. It really depends on, we're starting with the kind of the easier states that there are some states that have a nursing protection. So on the actual word nursing, in the eyes of the law, there's a protection around that. So you have to be, let's say, a registered nurse in order to have the title nurse in your name. And those states we're going to be saving for last. And so right now we're working on the states that are going to be a little bit easier to change, the ones that have the support of the veterinary, profession as a whole. They have the support of registered nurses, working in that community. They have the support of the public. Like it really takes a lot of groundwork to get this moving. And Ohio has been successful. And right now they're just waiting for the next term to come around, and then they're going to actually go before the House and complete the process. But we're learning along the way. It just started this year. And so it's going to take about another 5, 10, 15 years for this to come about. But it's something that the veterinary, nursing or technician profession has been struggling with over the last 30 years. Is really, there's this question of, I saw about 5 years ago, Colorado State had produced an article that was about, is it time for veterinary nurse practitioners? And they were looking at creating a program for veterinary nurse practitioners. And I think we're still a little bit behind. We're not quite there yet. But what does that look like? We don't know. In the human field, they have very distinct roles. You have a nurse practitioner, you have an RN, you have CNAs, certified nursing assistants, you have the MD, on up. And I think we don't have that distinction. And I think in order for us to get respect from the public, we got to have something. We have to, teach them, and we also have to have the words that they understand, so they know what to expect when they come into the practice. When they bring their pet to the hospital, who's going to be taking care of them? Who are they going to be talking to? What do they expect as far as level of care and the good quality care? And I think it starts there. And so there's a lot of work to do. It's really just the beginning, but we'll get there. It's going to take some time.
Yeah. I mean, so I can totally see why it would be important to change the name to registered veterinary nurse. But my question revolves more around the skill set, because having worked in a lot of different practices, I've seen a really huge variability in skill level and, education level. And my perception is that like the veterinary technician programs out there, there's a lot of variability in those programs. So, I can go into one practice and, the support staff is amazing. And like, oh my God, I can actually just be a doctor because I don't have to be a technician too. It's so awesome. Thank you. I love you, But then there are other practices where there are licensed or credentialed veterinary technicians and they can't do that stuff,
Absolutely.
So that's a problem that I think needs to be addressed in addition to changing the name. Standardization, like really, I don't know. I mean, how are you going to go back to these people who have, earned their LVT or CVT and they've been practicing for 10 years and they're not up to the same standards as the registered veterinary nurse is purported to be, right? How's that going to be addressed?
And that's an interesting question. And I think it's, we have to have kind of a discussion as a profession and see, what do we want? What do we want? What is quality? What is top-notch quality medicine? What is gold standard care? And then look at how do we get there? If we're not there, how do we maintain that gold standard care? And honestly, education is a big part of it. You have to, our DVMs have a set defined education, right? Right now you don't have to have a bachelor's to go into a DVM program, but your DVM program is 4 years. You're going to learn the same skill set regardless of where you go, as long as it's an accredited program. And then you come out and it's expected, it's exactly what's expected of you as a DVM. Right. And from a technician perspective, that's not there yet. And I think there has to be a basis of education and also a skill set. And the programs that are accredited by the AVMA, which is most of the programs in the States, in order for you to sit before the boards, you have to go to an accredited program. There is a set skill set, but what changes is the law. Even if you're licensed, from a program of the AVMA that's accredited by the AVMA, when you come into practice, the state that you're working in really determines what you can and cannot do. But the AVMA has a skill list that all of the technician programs teach. And, every program is a little bit different, of course, as far as the depth of knowledge and kind of the practical experience with maybe large animals might be one that's kind of lacking in some places because of availability. But yeah, I think it starts with what do we need, and what does it take to get there? And education is number one. Going into different states and kind of seeing kind of that flexibility or not having that standard of care. The patient is the one that suffers at the end of the day. And I think it's important that we all come to an agreement on what is it that we need in the profession, and aligning those goals with kind of this is what we're going to have. And, whether it's those people that don't have the education that are then going to require the education, I think it's fair, to say, hey, you have to go through a 2-year program. Do you have these skills? I went into a program. I had seen IV catheters being placed. I had these skills that I learned again in tech school, but the difference was I learned what else I could do with that skill. I learned the depth behind that skill, as a culture and sensitivity. I learned what that was about, and I learned how I can help the veterinarian with that. And I didn't have that in practice. I don't learn the depth of, these procedures and things. I didn't learn that. And going to school, that helped me figure out where I can apply it everywhere. But it also gave me a lot more understanding of anatomy, physiology, pharmacology, and, pharmacokinetics, and, all of these things that, you don't get in practice. You can't get that from a practical level. And I think it's necessary to have that depth of knowledge in order to really do our jobs well and to treat our patients how they should be.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I would love to see this happen. It's, but that would be my concern, is there's a lot of technicians out there practicing right now who I think would need to go back to school. Yeah. So
and I think that's okay. You know, it is, yes, it might take some time. And what are the reasons why they haven't gone to a program so far? You know, is it the location they're in? Is it because there's no scope of practice and so they're able to do everything and there's really no reason for them to go? But I think in order for us to really all practice at the same quality level of medicine, you got to have the same standards for your people that are doing that.
Yeah. Wow. Really interesting. I wonder if it goes forward and it passes, if that's going to be a case where, okay, everybody out there, now you need to come in and, take this exam or this practicum, whatever, and demonstrate that you're there. And if you're not, well, then you have to, go back. Wow, really complicated, huge initiative. But yeah, thanks for explaining that to me. And standard of care, I mean, gosh, I just anticipate a lot of argument over this issue, because well, what if the people that you're serving and the pets that you're serving don't have the money to pay for gold standard? Yeah, we'd love to provide gold standard for everybody, but not everybody is able or willing to pay for it. It's really complicated, Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, it comes from the community as a whole. I think we're not going to have a place where, every state pays a technician the same. There's different cost of living and things like that. But I think it's important for veterinarians to kind of start a conversation of, what do we need to really do our jobs well? There may be some veterinarians out there that are happy placing catheters and happy doing the technical stuff themselves. But honestly, I think it's time to pass the torch, and we have to start defining these things. If veterinarians are overworked, if veterinarians are, we're seeing higher suicide rates and we're seeing veterinarians unhappy, part of that, you got to delegate the work, and you also got to kind of do what you're trained to do and let the technical staff take that and be able to support you better in that realm. Spend more time communicating with your clients on what the diseases are, what the things are that the pet's experiencing and how they, what they can do to help it. And then spend time with medicine. That's what you went to school for. And I think veterinary technicians also have a lot to do with medicine as well. But a lot of veterinary technicians are on the technical level. That's where you're placing IV catheters, you're doing urinary, all those technical things that let the veterinarian do the thinking, the intellectual part of deciphering medicine. Technicians, they enjoy doing what they're doing. Veterinarians enjoy doing what they're doing. We work together on many aspects, but we have defined roles and what we can do and what we can do. I remember seeing an article, and I can't remember where it was, but there was a study done showing that veterinary practices where the technicians are actually allowed to do technician work rather than just being, assistant work. And the doctors are so much more efficient that the practices are more profitable.
Absolutely. Yeah. Your technicians are able to take some things off your plate, which allows you to spend more time with your clients. And when your clients have that value, they're willing to spend more money. And honestly, I think pet ownership comes with a financial responsibility. We as a veterinary profession in whole, if you have a service, like let's say your physical exam, if you do a physical exam on a pet and the client cannot afford it and you discount it, you just discounted your skills. You just discounted the value of the profession really in a whole. And I think there's something to be said for, we have to keep our owners accountable. We don't, having hoarders out there that have so many pets and things that they can't take care of. And what have we done to maybe contribute to some of that? And some of that comes from, there is a limit, financial responsibility to having a pet. We often think about your French bulldog, that's one of my favorite breeds out there, but ethically, I just can't have one. And how much money do you need to have a French bulldog? We see all the problems that are going to be associated with this dog throughout its life. Is this owner ready for that? And that comes, we have a responsibility to teach our owners what breed is best for them. And certainly rescuing, and I totally believe in these things, but at the same time, we have a profession. We have to be paid for what we do. or what you went to school for. You have school loans to pay for. I have school loans to pay for. We have a practice to pay for. If we want the pets to come into a practice and to get the care that they need, there's got to be a cost associated with that. I mean, there's still a business at the end of the day that has to survive.
I totally
and
agree.
the owners have to respect us as the veterinary profession as being the experts for them. Going to low cost things, that's something that we can do. But we cannot discount our own skill sets to meet the needs of the client. How many times have you seen someone pull up an Lexus and then say they can't pay you for their physical exam? I mean, really, like, that's accountability. And honestly, that's a huge discount to us. We go to school, we put our heart in everything we do every single day. We deserve to also be paid for what we do.
Yeah. So this makes me think like, there's probably a huge component of the veterinary registered nurse initiative and veterinary medicine in general that we need to do a better job of educating the public.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And your technicians can help you a lot with that. They have education, they have that skill set, and they've been taught, about these different diseases, and that frees you up to focus on your most critical cases and the cases that really need your attention right then and there.
Right. But what I mean, I'm sorry to interrupt, DJ, but when I say educate the public, I mean like educate the public, like you get what you pay for, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
We want to give you gold standard care, but if you're not willing to pay for it, then you can't have it, because there's a lot of demand for we should be perfect, we should do everything, et cetera, but not the willingness to pay for it. And I think that the general public really needs to be educated in terms of, hey, there is a lot of skill required in order to do this well. And skill requires education and continuing education and training and experience. And that costs money. It costs money to invest in your education as a registered veterinary nurse. It costs money to invest in your education as a veterinarian. And, we have to charge for this. So, and I think, I'd like to think that the majority of people out there who are pet owners would want to have the best care for their animals, and knowing, if they could only understand what we want them to understand, that they would agree that they need to pay for those services appropriately. I don't know how we get there.
Theoretical, I think because we are an emotional business, because we all come into this business because we are passionate about what we do. We're good people that really want to help animals, to help people. At the end of the day, I think that's where the bridge comes between, I get a dog, not personally, but, as an owner may say, I get a dog because I need somebody to have fun with. My kids love this dog. This is kind of like a child to me. Well, the financial piece is removed when you have an emotional, attachment to something, and you don't think about the cost of kind of having that maybe. And so when it comes into the clinic, yes, this is your child, but you have a responsibility to the health of your child, right? And there's insurances and things like that in, the human field. And certainly there's some of that in veterinary medicine as well. But there is a financial obligation to that. And we feel bad as a veterinary profession. We feel bad on saying you have to pay us for this, because we care for the health of the pet. And how often do we discount, our services to be sure the pet gets what they need? I mean, go back to the story of, the Great Dane that I experienced early on. We did that pre-op blood work for free, even though the owners declined it. We did it because we know that's the best thing to do for this pet, to make sure she's safe to go under anesthesia. We knew that. We didn't charge for it. The owners didn't want to do it. At the end of the day, what happened?
They sued you.
Yeah.
They sued you. Oh my God. And it turned out that if they had followed your recommendations, you would have found the mass in the chest.
Yeah, and we would have seen the Potter disorder. And absolutely. And I think we have a better job to do when it comes to communication, but we also have to create clear boundaries on what's important for us to survive as a veterinary profession, what's important for us to deliver the good quality care to our patients. And that comes, needing technology, needing good support staff, needing a clean, healthy, hospital culture and hospital physically to be able to provide that. And it's a business at the end of the day.
Right.
And you can bring emotions into business too, but you have to be really clear about the boundaries that are set and what you need to survive. And I think veterinarians and veterinary technicians are really the profession overall, being comfortable about talking about cost. That's important from the beginning. Yes, it's hard. Yes, walking to an ER, say that where the physical exam is $150. Why is that? Why is it $150? Because of the internships, maybe residencies, all the extra things you've done after vet school, but you still have vet loans to pay for. And then the medication, let's talk about ventilators and things that cost a lot more money that emergency hospitals have to prepare and to be able to provide that medicine. That's why it costs. And your pet's at an urgent need. If you're here, you got to pay. We're here. We're going to be able to take care of your pet. We want to do the best for your pet. There is a payment that comes with that in order for us to survive and to be here tomorrow to take care of your pet when something else happens.
Right.
And it's important that we get comfortable talking about cost because we have to own it, that we deserve that. And we deserve to have a comfortable life and putting our heart into something that we do a lot to get into.
Yeah. Couldn't agree with you more. DJ, do you have any specific advice for, I'm going to ask you two questions. So specific advice for future veterinarians, people who want to go into vet school, and also advice for people who want to become technicians or who are technicians, because you've got a really unique perspective.
Yeah, I think my advice is going to be the same, overall. I think one, be sound in what your heart is and why you're into this profession or why you want to come into this profession. Really look into the reasons why you're here. Look into medicine. I mean, medicine is a passion. If that's something you want to do, go for it. Do it. I think also going into that or, preparing for vet school or preparing for tech school, et cetera, know that the profession is experiencing what it is and bring something into the profession. Bring your perspective into our profession and help us grow and become a better profession overall as well. Taking care of ourselves, it starts there. If you're not healthy in your own self, you can't take care of a pet 100%. I mean, honestly, let's say if you're not healthy, you can't take care of your team. There's a lot of things you can't do. You have to start with you and you have to trust, respect yourself. You have to have that's integrity and everything from yourself to be able to do well in this profession. So I think it's important that, one, you have your health is good. You do the things that you need to do to be healthy every single day. It takes constant practice. You get one body, take care of it. And then the other part of that is know your passion, know where your passion is and follow through with that passion. There's none of us come into this industry as a whole for the money. And realize that from the beginning, but we can do a lot more to be creative in how we do in veterinary medicine. There's a lot of different things happening now. I mean, there's people that, are just speaking and they're getting paid for speaking and they're not necessarily in clinical practice anymore, but that's okay. Like we're being creative as a profession and we're taking ownership back of what we need to be healthy. And that comes to just being selfish of our own time. And when it comes to, veterinary hospitals and things like that, you work 40 hours a week and sometimes you work more than that and that's okay. But remember to take care of yourself, number one, in order for you to be there. Number two, take care of your patients, do the best you can every single day for your patients, for yourself, and also self-reflect and really take ownership of your own skills and things that you need to improve every single day. So that way you can help yourself and help your patients at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. Constant and never-ending improvement.
Absolutely. We're perfectionists. We're type A personalities, a lot of us. And I think it's important that we self-reflect and we take ownership of what we bring into the profession and what we can do differently for ourselves and the profession as a whole. Yeah,
the perfectionistic type A personality, which I am. And in a way, we sabotage ourselves and impede our own self-growth because we expect ourselves to be perfect right now, today.
Mm-hmm.
When we don't do everything perfectly, when we don't know everything that we think we should right now, we are very hard on ourselves and we feel like failures. When what we need to recognize is there's no such thing as perfection. You will never be done. You will never know everything. You just need to do your best day by day and recognize and appreciate the process of constant growth. That's
Absolutely.
all it is.
Yeah. Be your best self, know who you are, know where your strengths are, know where your weaknesses are, and develop relationships that can help you with that as well. Relationships are important. You have to have a good support system to be healthy. And I think it's important for people to know that going in, but also in the profession, it's important to be open-minded and be open to learning and talking about our struggles and talking about the things that, we have a hard time with every day.
Absolutely.
Like I said, with this a veterinarian that walks in the hospital and just has that attitude, I'm going to have a bad day. Well, let's just come into this room. Let's just talk about this. That starts a conversation of, I'm listening. Please tell me what you're going through. Please tell me what you're struggling with. And let's work through this together. I'm here for you. I'm here to support you. And I think it's okay to cry. It's okay to experience those emotions that are natural as human beings. What you do with those emotions, work through them, see why they're there. And tomorrow is a brand new day. Bring tomorrow as a brand new day, because the sunshine only comes after the rainbows, but you got to have a little rain first, right? And I, always think about that is there are going to be hard times, but you can't face those hard times from being anxious and being stressed, because it's going to be even harder because you've already started from the beginning with having that closed mind of, this is too much. It's okay if it's too much. Remember that too much is okay. It's a good challenge for you. At the end of the day, what are you doing with this experience that's going to help tomorrow? And I think it's important for us as humans to reflect on that and to validate our own emotions and know that that's natural to do. But we have to take care of ourselves. And first and foremost, emotionally is a big part of it.
And you said something earlier about being willing to be vulnerable, because it is, it's really, really difficult to say to your coworkers, this is something that I'm struggling with. I'm having a hard time with. I know I tend to show my frustration and I'm working on it.
Absolutely.
Do you have any advice from me? Maybe you could help me. Hey, you just say, Dr. K, you're looking a little frustrated. And that's my cue to just take a deep breath and calm down, So be willing to be vulnerable with your coworkers and let them help you.
Absolutely. And that does a lot.
Return the favor. Yeah, it really, really does. It really does. So we can recognize each other as human beings and not these like facades of supposed perfection that we're telling ourselves what we need to be. So
as leaders in the profession, it's important to have that open mind, to create a safe place for our people to grow and develop and to be able to be vulnerable and be comfortable with that.
Yeah.
Not all vulnerability is comfortable, but it's important to be yourself, stand your ground. Don't fluff up, just be you and be who you are. I mean, that's all you can do.
And DJ, is there any way for people to get in touch with you if they'd like to?
Absolutely. Yeah. My email is Cannon, CANNON, DJD@gmail.com.
Okay. I'll put that in the show notes. Thank you so much for your generous time. It's been so wonderful catching up and getting your perspective on everything that you've been through and the future of, registered veterinary nurses and all of that. Such a broad perspective. Thank you for sharing with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. And certainly good luck to everybody out there. I certainly hope you become a part of our profession. It's been a lot of fun. There's been a lot of good experiences. I can only say I am who I am today. And I've been able to learn so much and to grow as a person because of the profession as a whole and everybody that I've come in contact with. So thank you very much.
I hope you enjoyed today's show. If you found it helpful, please take a moment to leave a positive review of the Voices of Veterinary Medicine podcast and share this episode with anyone else who may also benefit. And whatever your current interest in veterinary medicine is, and wherever you are on your journey right now, I wish you a magnificent future. Content disclaimer. The opinions expressed in this podcast are those of host or guest alone and do not reflect those of respective employers or other affiliations. Unless otherwise stated, podcast guests and hosts claim no professional training or education in psychiatry, psychology, human nutrition, exercise, physiology, financial or legal matters, human medicine, or medical education. Please consult a certified or licensed expert in these areas for professional help. Any advice on veterinary medical practice provided by the author or guests is intended only for application by licensed veterinarians capable of using their own medical judgment. Nothing in this podcast implies or intends to establish a doctor-client-patient relationship, and any information provided about pet care is for entertainment purposes only. For medical advice pertaining to your pets, consult a licensed veterinarian in your area. In no event should the host or guest be responsible or liable, directly or indirectly, for any damage or loss caused or alleged to be caused by or in connection with the use of or reliance on any information provided in these podcasts. It is the listener's responsibility to research the accuracy, completeness, and usefulness of all opinions and other information provided by the hosts and guests of the Voices of Veterinary Medicine podcast.